Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a story few dare to tell. 21 black R&B legends who tragically died of AIDS. What if I told you that the same voices that once shook churches, lifted spirits, and filled the world with songs of faith, hope, and redemption were carrying a devastating secret? Behind the glow of choir robes, the power of gospel stages, and the thunder of standing ovations, 21 legendary artists were quietly fighting a battle in the shadows. Their enemy wasn't just the disease, it was the crushing weight of stigma. These were men and women whose voices soared to the heavens, yet their lives were silenced by a tragedy too many still whisper about: AIDS. Their music promised salvation, but their reality was a storm of fear, pain, and isolation. And as their stories unfold, you'll discover truths that are heartbreaking, shocking, and impossible to ignore. Stay with us until the end. You'll be surprised by what history tried to hide. Sylvester James Jr., the disco icon who danced his way into both glory and heartbreak. He wasn't just a singer, he was a revolution in glitter heels. With a falsetto so high it rattled dance floors across America, Sylvester turned songs like You Make Me Feel, Mighty Real, into anthems of freedom. He didn't just climb the charts, he shattered barriers, becoming a fearless symbol of queerness and liberation in a world that wasn't ready for either. Long before the spotlight, he was a gospel prodigy, a boy whose voice could lift a church to heaven. But under the strobe lights and mirror balls of 1970 San Francisco, he became the heartbeat of the city's gay nightlife, a radiant flame burning bright in a world of pounding beats, wild parties, and unapologetic joy. Yet behind the sequins and dazzling stage shows, a silent killer crept into the community: HIV. No one warned them. No one understood the danger. By the summer of 1988, the same body that once strutted proudly in high heels was confined to a hospital bed. Diagnosed with opportunistic pneumonia, the cruel shadow of AIDS, his mighty voice was reduced to whispers. Friends who visited saw not the sparkling star, but a fragile figure, skeletal, gasping for air through a machine. On December 16, 1988, at just 41 years old, Sylvester drew his final breath. The disco world fell silent. The LGBTQ+ community mourned not only the loss of a legend, but of a beacon of defiance, joy, and possibility. And still, a haunting question lingers. If awareness had come sooner, if protection had been preached louder, could this icon have been saved? Sylvester lived boldly, brilliantly, without apology. But his death was a sobering whisper, a painful reminder of a generation lost too soon. Germaine Stewart, the dance pop darling of the 1980s, once blazed across the stage like a shooting star, radiant, joyful, and unforgettable. With his irresistible anthem, "We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off," he lit up radios from America to Europe, embodying a clean-cut charm wrapped in energy and innocence. But behind the glittering lights and his dazzling smile was a young man quietly fighting battles the world never saw. Long before the fame, Germaine was just a choir boy in Ohio, his angelic voice leading Sunday services with devotion. Yet innocence faded when he was swept into the whirlwind of New York, London, and Los Angeles. The nightlife became his second stage: lavish parties, celebrity encounters, and temptations that came with dangerous price tags. Whispers tied him to icons like Madonna and Culture Club, but what happened behind closed doors remained hidden in the shadows. Amid the champagne, cocaine, and fleeting encounters, Germaine unknowingly contracted HIV, a diagnosis that carried fear, stigma, and silence in a decade when few dared to even speak its name. By the early 90s, his glow began to dim. His once powerful voice faltered, his body grew fragile, and then came liver cancer, triggered by his weakened immune system. The vibrant performer who once owned the spotlight was reduced to a frail figure tethered to 4 drips, his body burning with fever, his spirit weighed down by loneliness. In his final days, family remembered him staring out a hospital window, his eyes heavy with sorrow, words all but gone. On March 17, 1997, at just 39 years old, Germaine Stewart took his final bow in a Chicago hospital. The world lost more than a star that day. It lost the truth behind the facade. Beneath the upbeat dance beats was a man who gave everything to his art but received little mercy in return. In the end, he became yet another name in a generation stolen too soon by a silent killer. Kenny Green, the golden voice that slipped into silence. In the heartbeat of 90s R&B, Kenny wasn't just a rising star, he was a storm. A voice so smooth it could melt hearts. A songwriter whose words cut deep enough to leave scars. As the frontman of Intro, he didn't just perform, he defined a sound, carrying the weight of a generation. His gift was born in a Maryland church choir at just 5 years old, shaped by gospel, sharpened by soul. But behind the glow of the spotlight lived a truth few dared to see. Kenny walked through the music world as a black gay man in an industry that punished honesty. By night, he found freedom in New York's underground, where clubs like Paradise Garage pulsed with music, drugs, and desire. Yet that freedom came with a price. In the shadows of joy, HIV stalked silently, claiming lives without mercy. Kenny was caught in its path before he ever saw it coming. Even as his songs climbed the charts and his shows sold out, he carried the burden alone. But by 2001, the mask cracked. The once strong body that had commanded stages withered, shedding more than 40 pounds. Pneumonia turned to sepsis. His lungs collapsed, his organs began to fail. And on October 1, 2001, in a New York hospital, the applause was gone. The only sound left was the cold, steady rhythm of hospital machines. He was just 32. Kenny Green's voice once soared toward heaven, but in the end, his truth was smothered by fear, stigma, and a world not ready to embrace him fully. His story endures as a haunting reminder: fame can dazzle, but it can also destroy. Bobby DeBarge had a voice that soared to the heavens, yet a life that collapsed in silence. He was the heartbeat of Switch, the falsetto so pure it turned heartbreak into harmony and made the world fall in love with R&B all over again. Long before the fame, Bobby was Detroit's golden child, singing gospel with his siblings in crowded church pews, a bright promise of everything that was to come. But behind that angelic sound lived a storm no one could see. At the height of his career, when the spotlight blazed the brightest, Bobby's world slipped into darkness. Heroin crept in like a thief, stealing pieces of him backstage in quiet corners. Away from the cheers, needles replaced microphones. No fear, no hesitation, just the false comfort of escape. The fame, the after-parties, the blurred nights with men and women, it was all a whirlwind masking a silent scream. In the early 1980s, Bobby contracted HIV. At a time when treatment was just a dream, the virus became a silent killer cloaked in stigma and shame. By the mid-1990s, it ravaged his body. Kaposi's sarcoma left purple scars across his skin, his kidneys failed, and the stage that once gave him life was replaced by a hospital bed in his mother's modest Grand Rapids home. No more fans, no roaring applause, only oxygen machines, blood draws, and whispered prayers. On August 16, 1995, Bobby DeBarge slipped away at just 39 years old, not only from AIDS, but from 1,000 unspoken wounds buried behind the applause. He had it all: talent, beauty, fame, fortune, but he couldn't outrun the demons that haunted him. His death wasn't just tragic, it was a chilling reminder that even the brightest stars can fade into darkness. Like Sharon Redd, the disco diva silenced by the same epidemic, Bobby's story still echoes, a voice from a generation lost to shadows. Sharon Redd wasn't just a singer, she was a storm wrapped in sequins. When she stepped onto the stage at Studio 54, the walls didn't simply echo with her voice, they trembled. She was disco royalty, a queen who could turn a crowded dance floor into sacred ground. But before the champagne, the flashing lights, and the endless nights, Sharon's voice first rose from the wooden pews of New York churches. For 15 years, gospel had been her training ground, and every note she sang carried the fire of heaven and the weight of heartbreak. By the early 90s, that fire was fading. The vibrant glow that once lit up every room dimmed to a ghostly pale. Her eyes, once alive with rhythm, hollowed out. Her body, once unstoppable, withered to just 90 pounds. The New York apartment that once shook with laughter and music fell silent, transformed into a tomb of loneliness and pain. On May 1, 1992, with fever burning and breath failing, she was rushed to the hospital. The doctor's words cut sharp and merciless: aggressive pneumonia, raging sepsis. Within hours her lungs collapsed, her heart followed, and Sharon slipped into a coma. Moments later, silence. At just 46 years old, she was gone, only blocks away from the nightclub that had once crowned her a goddess of the night. But illness alone didn't take her. The executioner was silent, merciless: AIDS. In the late 70s, Sharon lived like a firework, brilliant, reckless, unforgettable. Nights bled into mornings, champagne spilled like water, and she embraced life with abandon, loving freely men, women, musicians, models. But it was an era when HIV had no name, no cure, no mercy. By the time the truth revealed itself, it was already too late. No treatments, no hope, just the ticking of a cruel clock. Sharon Redd, once a dazzling queen of disco, didn't lose to fading fame. She was claimed by a plague that silenced too many too soon. She died in the same city that once bowed at her feet. But this time, when the news spread, the dance floor stayed still. Gil Scott-Heron wasn't just a musician, he was the pulse of revolution. The man who turned Harlem into a battlefield of truth, wielding words sharper than knives and rhythms that cut straight into the conscience of a nation. A prophet of spoken word, a renegade poet, the father of rap before hip-hop even knew its name. Raised in the gospel halls of his grandmother's Baptist church, his voice first soared in hymns of salvation. But that same voice would grow into a roar, a thunderous outcry against injustice, addiction, and the darkest corners of America's soul. Gil blurred every boundary, between jazz and rebellion, between poetry and protest, between redemption and ruin. He thrived in the shadows, in smoky basements, endless jam sessions, whispers over whiskey and heroin. But the same life that fueled his fire slowly poisoned him. On May 27, 2011, in a New York hospital, the man who once shook presidents with poetry lay frail and fading, barely 110 pounds, his skin yellowed, his body surrendering to years of torment. The doctors said sepsis, liver failure, hepatitis. But the truth was crueler. Gil had carried HIV since the early 1980s, back when the diagnosis was a death sentence and the world turned its back on those it struck. Between the needles, the drugs, the nameless nights backstage, the virus slipped quietly into his veins. And like so many artists of that cursed era, he kept performing, kept burning, even as the clock ticked down. By the time he faced the truth, it was too late. The firebrand who once turned poetry into a weapon slipped away almost unnoticed, his death a whisper. But his life was a battle cry. Gil Scott-Heron didn't just speak for a generation. He warned it. And in the end, he became the very cautionary tale he once sang about. Fela Kuti, the firebrand, the thunderclap, the man who turned music into a weapon of war, was silenced by a disease no one in Nigeria dared to name. He wasn't just a musician. He was a storm. A fearless rebel who fused jazz, funk, and African rhythms into something the world would forever know as Afrobeat. Born into a family of preachers, his voice once lifted hymns in church. But that voice grew into the roar of a continent demanding freedom. Fela was more than an artist. He was defiance incarnate, a cultural giant who shook Nigeria's foundations with every note. Yet behind the fire, a silent killer crept in. On August 2, 1997, the nation woke to the unthinkable. Fela was gone. And the family's confession stunned the world. He had died of AIDS. For a man who once seemed untouchable, the truth cut like a blade. In his final days, he shunned hospitals and doctors, choosing instead to remain inside the Calcutta Republic. Once a raucous sanctuary of music and rebellion, it became a dim room where the great lion lay wasting away. His powerful body reduced to skin and bone, his skin scarred by Kaposi's sarcoma, his lungs shredded by pneumonia. The man who once roared at presidents now whispered like a ghost. But Fela's death wasn't random. It was the echo of a life lived with no restraints. He had married 27 wives in one ceremony, filled his compound with music, palm wine, marijuana, and reckless indulgence. Protection was never used. Testing never done. In 1980s Nigeria, AIDS was dismissed as a foreign rumor, and Fela, proud and unshaken, believed it could never touch him. Until it did. And when it came, he met it with silence. No treatment. No fight. Almost as if, for once, he surrendered. His death wasn't just the fall of a legend, it was a brutal wake-up call. The man who never bowed to any government, any president, or any authority was finally brought down by a virus he refused to acknowledge. And for an entire generation, his passing carved one painful truth in stone: even icons bleed. Even giants fall. James Cleveland, the gospel king who died in silence, overshadowed by a plague the church refused to name. Revered as the father of modern gospel, his voice could rattle the rafters of heaven. His songs didn't just fill pews, they healed broken hearts and shaped the heartbeat of R&B and soul. From the time he was just 4 years old, singing in small Chicago sanctuaries, his path was clear. He was born to minister through music. From humble choir lofts, he rose to the grandest stages, mentoring legends and becoming the very symbol of faith and devotion. But behind the platinum records and sermons was a man burdened by a secret too heavy to confess. On February 9, 1991, James Cleveland died in a Los Angeles hospital. For weeks, the gospel world was left in stunned silence. No cause of death. No explanation. Just whispers. Until the truth broke through, he had died from complications of AIDS. The revelation shook the church to its core, not only because of the diagnosis but because of the silence, the denial, the unraveling of an image so carefully built. By the end, Cleveland was unrecognizable, fragile, emaciated, his body ravaged by sores and sepsis, his organs failing. And yet almost no one knew. His illness was hidden, treated like a scandal instead of a suffering. There were no vigils, no public prayers, no farewell from the church he had given his life to. They feared the stigma more than they grieved the man. Whispers had long followed him, late-night gatherings at his home, a piano, a bottle of cognac, the quiet company of young gay singers. Private relationships never spoken of, sealed behind locked doors. Somewhere in those secret years, before the world even had a name for AIDS, Cleveland contracted the virus. He never sought treatment. He never spoke of it, not to the public, not to the church, maybe not even to himself. In the end, the man who gave a voice to millions died without using his own when it mattered most. James Cleveland's story is one of brilliance and repression, triumph and tragedy, a king of gospel who lifted countless souls to the heavens, but carried his own truth to the grave in silence. Wilmer Broadnax was more than a gospel singer, he was a force of nature. His voice soared like a prayer set to music, lifting congregations into something close to heaven itself. Born in Houston, Texas, and raised in the heart of the Black church, Broadnax gave his life to sacred song, shaping the sound of powerhouse groups like the Golden Echoes and the Five Trumpets. To his followers, he wasn't just a performer, he was the living sound of God's Spirit. But behind that angelic voice hid a truth the world wasn't ready to hear. On June 1, 1994, Broadnax took his final breath inside a modest Philadelphia apartment. He was 77, his body ravaged by AIDS-related complications. It was not a gentle passing. It was cruel, slow, and unbearably lonely. The once proud man who had commanded stages with fire and authority spent his last months in a wheelchair, frail, covered in lesions, lungs collapsing from pneumonia as his body gave way piece by piece. And the gospel world? It barely noticed. No tributes. No church bells. Just silence. Then the secret surfaced. Wilmer Broadnax had lived his entire life as a transgender man. A truth buried for decades beneath fear and gospel traditions that left no place for someone like him. In the 1960s and 70s, while touring the segregated South, he would slip away after shows, chasing stolen moments of intimacy with men, always hidden, always smothered in secrecy. Even a whisper of his reality could have destroyed his career, his reputation, his very life. By the early 80s, he had contracted HIV, long before the church believed AIDS could reach their pulpits. He carried it in silence, bearing a cross no one else could see, until it finally broke him. His death left no memorial, no celebration of his gift, only an empty space where his truth had been buried. Yet today, Broadnax's story rises louder than the silence that once smothered it. It is both warning and legacy, a reminder that even the holiest voices can hide unbearable pain, and that no truth, no matter how heavy or uncomfortable, should ever be forced to die in the dark. Luther Vandross, the velvet voice that draped the world in love, was silenced by a truth too heavy to sing aloud. Before the fame, before the sold-out arenas, he was just a boy from New York, lifting his soul through gospel choirs. That fire never left him. You could hear it in every lyric, every silky note that crowned him the undisputed king of R&B romance. Luther didn't just sing about love, he embodied it. But behind the flawless melodies and glowing spotlight was a secret that couldn't be written into a chorus. On July 1, 2005, at only 54, Luther was gone. The reports were vague, the family silent, yet the whispers never ceased. In time, the truth emerged: he had been quietly battling AIDS. In a New Jersey hospital, the man once celebrated for elegance and light was nearly unrecognizable. Kaposi's sarcoma marked his skin. His kidneys failed. His body gave way. By the end, the voice that once melted arenas could barely form a whisper. He died in isolation, no ovations, no farewell, only silence. The kind of silence that cuts deeper than any song. And the tragedy stretched further still. As years passed, pieces of his private life surfaced. Luther never publicly came out, yet he was no stranger to New York's elite gay circles. Lavish penthouse gatherings, slow dances hidden in shadows, love stories lived in secrecy. In the early days of HIV, when stigma ruled and ignorance destroyed, he walked a fragile line between stardom and forbidden desire. Somewhere along that line, the virus slipped in, unseen and unstoppable. By the time he realized, it was too late. Luther Vandross gave the world the soundtrack of love. But in the cruelest twist of all, love was the very thing he was never allowed to fully claim. Brenda Fassie wasn't just a singer, she was a wildfire. The untamed spark of South African pop, burning too bright, too fast, and gone far too soon. Fans called her Africa's Madonna, but Brenda was never just a nickname. From the hum of a township church choir, her voice rose to command an entire nation. By the 1980s and 90s, she was unstoppable, belting out explosive anthems like Weekend Special and Vullenlila, rewriting the rules of fame with every note she sang. But Brenda wasn't only a star, she was a storm. Flashbulbs, scandalous headlines, all-night parties. Her life blurred between glory and chaos. And hidden beneath the glamour, a silent enemy was already at work. On May 9, 2004, at just 39 years old, Brenda's flame was extinguished in a Johannesburg hospital. The world was told the cause was AIDS complications, but those words barely capture the devastation of her final days. By the end, Brenda lay in a coma. Her body swollen, kidneys failing, her once radiant face nearly unrecognizable. Machines kept her alive, but her immune system had already surrendered. Pneumonia and infections claimed what little strength was left. Behind closed doors, her family said little. The world looked on in disbelief, watching a legend vanish before their eyes. Yet Brenda's tragedy didn't begin in a hospital bed. It began in the unforgiving glare of fame. Openly bisexual in a country still wrestling with HIV stigma, she lived with fearless defiance. Her homes in Johannesburg and Cape Town became infamous for wild, hedonistic nights, filled with lovers, drugs, music, and drink. She chased freedom at full speed, unafraid, until the early 90s, when HIV quietly entered her bloodstream. Still, she kept singing, kept dancing, kept pretending she was untouchable. But no one outruns the truth forever. And when the music finally stopped, it was too late. Ray Charles wasn't just a musician, he was the heartbeat of America. From the wooden pews of tiny Florida churches where his voice first soared, to the grandest stages on earth, Ray didn't just sing. He turned sound into pure emotion, reshaping soul, jazz, and R&B forever. But on June 10, 2004, the music went silent. Inside his Beverly Hills mansion, far from the roar of applause, The genius who once electrified millions lay frail and fading. Just 120 pounds, nearly bald, his body scarred by the cruel lesions of Kaposi's sarcoma. His final days were a brutal reminder of how even the brightest lights can burn out. Behind the timeless melodies was a man consumed by desire. He fathered 12 children with 10 women. Recording studios doubled as playgrounds of liquor, laughter, and lust. On the road, he lived recklessly, drowning in a sea of unprotected affairs. By the late 70s, HIV had already crept into his bloodstream, silent, undetected, until it was too late. His body slowly betrayed him, rejecting food, rejecting treatment, rejecting the very man who once seemed untouchable. What the world lost that day was more than a voice. It was a cautionary tale. Ray Charles could bring nations to their knees with a single note. Yet behind the legend was a man undone by his own unraveling. A brilliant flame, extinguished too coldly too soon. Little Richard, the wild child who lit the fuse of rock and roll, didn't leave this world with the thunder of his music, but with a silence that broke hearts. Once, his pounding piano, gospel fire, and flamboyant flair shook the earth and turned Southern church hymns into global anthems. But on May 9, 2020, in a quiet Tennessee home, there were no flashing lights, no screaming fans, only a frail body tethered to oxygen, surrendering to pneumonia and unrelenting infections. Behind the glitter, the fire, and the screams of adoring crowds was a life that burned too hot, too fast. Decades of vodka-soaked nights, whirlwind affairs, and chaotic hotel rooms left scars that even his dazzling presence couldn't hide. Boldly bisexual and unapologetically outrageous, Little Richard shocked Hollywood and Europe with decadent, no-limits parties where excess was the only rule. Somewhere in that storm, HIV crept in, likely in the mid-1980s, but Richard lived as if mortality couldn't touch him. Every stage, every spotlight was another act of defiance. By the time the final curtain fell, the man who once set the world ablaze had become a shadow of his former self, fading into solitude. His end was quiet, lonely, a tragic encore for the legend who spent his life commanding center stage. Teddy Pendergrass, the voice that once set hearts on fire, didn't leave this world with thunderous applause, but with a whisper stolen by AIDS. From the church pews of Philadelphia to sold-out arenas filled with screaming fans, Teddy rose like a storm. His deep, magnetic voice made him a sex symbol adored by thousands. But behind the silk suits and slow-burning ballads lived a man carrying secrets, walking on borrowed time. By January 13, 2010, the glamour had faded. In a hospital room in Bryn Mawr, Teddy lay frail and swollen, lungs collapsing, kidneys failing, paralyzed and stripped of the voice that once ruled millions. He could only speak through faint glances, each one an echo of the legend he once was. Even after the 1982 car crash that left him paralyzed from the chest down, the parties never truly stopped. The cognac kept flowing, the lights stayed dim, and the rendezvous continued. HIV crept into his life in the late 1980s, when the world still whispered the word with fear and shame. Teddy never spoke of it. He suffered in silence. By the end, all that remained was a fragile shadow of the icon who once made lovers swoon. Teddy Pendergrass didn't just sing about love. He lived it, he lost it, and he burned for it. In his silence, he left behind a haunting reminder: fame can fill a room, but it can never heal a soul. Barry White, the maestro of love, silenced by a cruel twist of fate. He wasn't just a singer, he was the embodiment of romance itself. With that deep, velvety baritone, he could make the world stop and listen. Every lyric he sang dripped with passion, every note carried soul, seduction, and style. From humble beginnings in Los Angeles church choirs, he rose to become an icon, a global symbol of desire and devotion. But behind the music and the magnetic charm, a tragic truth was unfolding. On July 4, 2003, the man who gave us timeless anthems of love took his final breath. Not from age, but from the devastating grip of AIDS and kidney failure. Dialysis kept him alive for a time, but his body was breaking. Fevers raged. Sepsis poisoned his blood. His once mighty frame swelled so painfully that even his clothes couldn't contain him. It all traced back to the height of his fame: the champagne, the parties, the nights drenched in music, women, and endless temptation. In Hollywood's glittering glow, Barry lived as if love were infinite, but protection was too often forgotten. And in the cruelest irony, the very passion he celebrated in song became the force that destroyed him. His voice, part thunder, part velvet, was silenced forever. Yet the memory of Barry White lives on. His music remains a timeless promise, reminding us that while the man may be gone, the love he gave the world will never fade. Wilson Pickett wasn't just the wicked Pickett of soul, he was a storm that lit up the sky and vanished far too soon. Born in Alabama, he didn't ease his way onto the scene. He exploded into it with a scream, a strut, and a fire that no stage could contain. When he belted out hits like In the Midnight Hour and Land of 1,000 Dances, radios didn't just play, they erupted. By the late 60s and 70s, he wasn't simply a star, he was soul royalty, a man who could turn heat into music and gospel into gold. But offstage, his life burned at both ends. Nights drowned in rum and cocaine, women and fleeting pleasures scattered across continents. He moved like a man who feared tomorrow, living reckless in an age when HIV was whispered about in shadows. For years, the silence chased him, until it caught up. On January 19, 2006, the music world froze. Wilson Pickett was gone, his once mighty frame whittled down by AIDS-related complications. The body that once commanded every stage was now ravaged by Kaposi's sarcoma, machines keeping him alive as his organs failed one by one. The thunder that once shook every crowd had gone quiet. Wilson Pickett lived like lightning, loud, wild, unforgettable. But even lightning fades. And when his storm finally passed, it left behind a haunting truth. No matter how powerful the voice, no one outruns the cost of living too fast. Isaac Hayes, the deep-voiced titan of soul, once dripping with swagger and power, met a hauntingly quiet and far removed from the blinding spotlight he once commanded. He wasn't just a musician, he was a movement. From redefining soundtracks with the unforgettable theme from Shaft to embodying raw masculinity, charisma, and genius, Hayes carved his name into music history. But behind the iconic baritone and the gleam of gold chains, a darker truth lingered. On August 10, 2008, in Memphis, the legend's voice fell silent. AIDS had ravaged his immune system, leaving him defenseless. Pneumonia and sepsis swept in, and within days he was gone. The man once built like a fortress had wasted away. His powerful frame reduced to frailty. Sores broke across his skin. His face grew gaunt. His body unrecognizable, hidden away in those final weeks. The official story stayed hushed, but whispers floated for years. Wild nights at Stack Studios, endless parties, liquor flowing like water, fleeting romances blurred into rhythm. Hayes lived on impulse, fueled by passion and excess. He fathered 12 children across tangled relationships while HIV crept in during his prime, cloaked by pride, fame, and denial. In the end, it wasn't just a virus that claimed him. It was the silence. The secrets too heavy to carry. The price of a life lived forever on the edge, between brilliance and destruction. Miriam Makeba, the voice of Africa. To the world, she was Mama Africa, more than a singer, more than an icon. She was a warrior who stood against apartheid, a Grammy-winning legend, and the living heartbeat of African pride. Yet behind the applause and the standing ovations, she carried a secret she never spoke aloud. On the night of November 9, 2008, after what would be her final performance in Italy, Makeba collapsed backstage. Paramedics fought to save her, but her lungs were failing, her heart struggling with every beat. In the hospital, doctors uncovered the devastating truth: advanced complications from HIV. Her hands were blistered and cold, her body exhausted from years of silent battle. The world mourned a legend, never realizing the hidden war she had fought in silence. During her decades of exile across the US and Europe, Makeba lived life like a whirlwind: music, wine, passion, and unguarded love. She married 5 times, embraced countless romances, and moved through an era when HIV was misunderstood and incurable. Somewhere on that journey, the virus found her. But true to her spirit, she never stopped singing, never stopped smiling, even as illness quietly drained her strength. Miriam Makeba died as she lived, with her voice still powerful, her body in pain, and her truth more shocking than the world ever imagined. Billy Preston, the forgotten genius who helped shape the very heartbeat of the Beatles' sound, didn't leave this world to a standing ovation, but to a silence heavy with secrets he never dared to speak. Hailed by many as the fifth Beatle, Preston was a prodigy born of gospel roots in Houston, a child whose music carried him across continents to share the stage with titans like the Beatles, Ray Charles, and the Rolling Stones. His fingers danced across the organ with lightning speed, igniting arenas and leaving audiences spellbound. But beyond the blinding spotlight, his final chapter was etched in pain, isolation, and heartbreaking quiet. On June 6, 2006, in a modest hospital room in Scottsdale, Arizona, Billy took his last breath. After months in a coma, the once vibrant star lay frail and broken, sustained only by machines. The medical verdict was merciless: AIDS complications, pericarditis, sepsis. Yet those sterile words hid a deeper truth: 2 decades of silent suffering. Since the mid-1980s, Billy had been living with HIV. A closeted gay man in an unforgiving era, he bore the crushing weight of being both black and queer in a music industry that demanded silence. His truth drowned in the chaos of Los Angeles nights, drugs, fleeting lovers, endless jam sessions. Each escape carried danger, but exposure meant ruin. In those days, AIDS wasn't just an illness. It was a sentence, and secrecy became his shield. Billy left this world much the way he had lived behind closed doors, hidden behind brilliance, misunderstood, and heartbreakingly alone. No piano, no thunderous applause, just a man whose unmatched talent was shadowed by a heart burdened with unspoken sorrow. James Brown, the godfather of soul, the spark that ignited funk, didn't leave this world with a scream, but with a whisper. On Christmas Day 2006, the man who once set stadiums ablaze with raw power and guttural fire faded away in a cold Atlanta hospital room, far from the thunder of cheering crowds. His body, ravaged by the late stages of AIDS, had withered by more than 30 pounds. His skin was torn by ulcers, his breathing shallow, and the legendary voice that once shook the earth was reduced to a faint rasp. It was an end no one could have pictured for a man who embodied swagger, rhythm, and unstoppable energy. In the 1980s, Brown still lit up stages like a comet streaking across the sky. But behind the curtain, chaos consumed him. Nights blurred into ecstasy-fueled highs, reckless encounters, and nameless faces. Without knowing the silent killer stalking his body, he drove himself deeper into addiction, exhaustion, and heartbreak. To the world, he was still the legend. Inside, he was slowly unraveling. By the time the truth emerged, it was already too late. And when James Brown drew his final breath that Christmas morning, he didn't just take with him a chapter of music history. He carried a storm of secrets buried deep beneath the beat. Umanji. Across the ocean, another legend's story rises, then falls. A South African star whose voice didn't just sing, it soared. From the echo of church choirs to the roar of festival crowds, his vibrant mix of folk pop and African rhythms lit up every stage he touched. But on February 27, 2008, the music stopped. In a Johannesburg hospital, his frail body, ravaged by sepsis and meningitis, the cruel complications of HIV, lay almost unrecognizable. Covered in sores, pale, fragile, he was a shadow of the man who once set audiences ablaze. In the 1990s, as South Africa's HIV epidemic spread like wildfire, Umanji became one of its countless victims. The nightlife, the parties, the fleeting freedom of fame, all hid the danger lurking in the background. By the time he realized, it was too late. The lights dimmed, the song ended, and the stage grew silent. Behind every spotlight, there was always a shadow. And for many of gospel's greatest voices, that shadow carried secrets too heavy to share. These 21 gospel legends were more than icons of faith. They were human, brilliant, flawed, and too often suffering in silence. Their stories are not just tragedies. They are warnings, about the cost of silence, about how stigma destroys, and about how even the brightest stars can be buried in shame. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Please like and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive.